Do you know the feeling when you are completely absorbed in an activity, lost in time, oblivious of the world around you? Then you have probably experienced flow. What this phenomenon is all about and what it takes to achieve it, we'll find out today. Welcome to the Soft Skill channel. My name is Sebastian Jung and today I'd like to introduce you to flow. Flow means sinking into an activity, being absorbed in it, losing oneself in it. It is quite a pleasant state. It was researched mostly by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he identified a couple of typical characteristics of flow. So people who have had a flow experience and describe how it felt usually name several or even all of the following. There is a challenge involved. We are challenged and we have to use our skills to overcome it. Our consciousness and our actions merge, become one. We are totally absorbed in the activity. Often the activity seems effortless. We seem to progress almost by itself, almost automatically. We have high clarity. We have a clear goal ahead of us. We are working towards it. We have immediate feedback, so we always know if we are doing well, if we are progressing towards our goal, if what we do is working or not. We are totally concentrated. Our attention is completely focused on the task at hand. Our mind does not wander. We do not think about our worries, our day-to-day business, but we are totally concentrated on what we are doing. And often we don't notice anything in our surroundings anymore. We have a feeling of control. We believe that we are in control of the situation. Even if that is not true, we can, for example, experience flow while gambling, but at least we have the illusion of control. Our self-consciousness kind of disappears. Our self moves into the background. We don't worry what other people think about us, things like that. And often we even don't notice our needs anymore. After a flow experience, we might say, oh, I'm suddenly becoming aware that I'm totally hungry or tired. I didn't notice all this time because during the flow experience, we are not self-conscious. Still, after the flow experience, our self often receives a small boost. We become more self-confident due to the flow experience. A very typical characteristic is that our perception of time changes. A long stretch of time might move past almost unnoticed. After a flow experience, we might say, what? 5 hours have passed? It seemed like 5 minutes to me. Or it might also be the other way around. For example, think of a surgeon performing a very complicated operation and he is in a critical step, or they are in a critical step, and in that moment, a mere few seconds might seem like an eternity to them. And finally, what we are doing becomes an end in itself. We are performing this activity for its own sake and we enjoy the doing in itself, enjoy the activity in itself without trying to achieve some external goal. Now, I should probably elaborate on that last point because earlier I said we have a clear goal in mind and now I'm saying the activity is an end in itself. As I understand it, it works like this. Imagine again a surgeon performing a critical, complicated operation. Clearly, They want to successfully finish this operation, but they don't think about their salary, the promotion they're trying to achieve, their job, something like this. Or a runner who experiences flow while running is clearly heading towards the finishing line and trying to reach the finishing line, but they do not think about the contest they're trying to win, the medal they might get, or what they will spend their prize money on. Or a painter who is an artist who is experiencing flow might have a vision of what the finished painting should look like, but they don't worry about whether they will be able to sell the painting for a lot of money, whether it will make them famous, something like that. So we have the immediate goal of the activity clearly ahead of us, but we don't try to achieve anything else by doing it. We don't think about external goals. This list of activities, by the way, differs a bit depending on which source you look at, but this usually concerns only details, how many points exactly are there, how they are distributed. The content is usually pretty much the same. Now I'd like to say a few words about Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the man who is most closely associated with the topic of flow. Now obviously the phenomenon itself has existed for a long time, has probably always existed, and other people mentioned it here and there, but Csikszentmihalyi was the first one to really focus on this phenomenon, to really research it in detail. And he also was the one who gave flow its name. He used this term, by the way, because people who described flow experiences to him in interviews frequently used similar metaphors, like a state where everything seemed to be flowing and effortless and so on. So he thought, well, this is a good term. Csikszentmihalyi presented flow for the first time in 1975 in his book Beyond Boredom and Anxiety, Experiencing Flow in Work and Play. And he later published several more books that deal with flow. The most important of those is simply called Flow and was first published in 1990. It has a subtitle. The subtitle varies depending on the edition. I think the original one was The Psychology of Optimal Experience. Here we have the classic work on how to blah blah blah. Subtitle isn't important. The book is just called Flow, and this is pretty much the most important source on the topic. I won't discuss it here in detail. We will probably have a book review about it at some later point, just so you have a basic understanding of the direction it takes. There are two main points of focus. First, Csikszentmihalyi talks a lot about the consciousness related to flow. For example, he differentiates between enjoyment we derive, for example, from flow, and simple pleasure we derive from satisfying our needs. He discusses the matter of control of our consciousness, control of our attention, focus, and so on, personal development, things like that. And the second big point is that he discusses flow in different areas: flow in physical activities, in mental activities, flow at work, flow in relationships, and flow in our life in general. So those are the two biggest aspects in the book. Now, what we would like to know is, if flow is such a nice and pleasurable experience, how do we achieve it? How can we get some flow for ourselves? Now, flow cannot be consciously created or forced in some way, but we can provide the conditions flow is most likely to occur in. And there are several external and internal factors. In regard to the external ones, first, it is good to know that there are few restrictions in regard to the type of activity, which is very nice. We can experience flow in physical activities, but also in mental activities. So flow can be experienced by athletes and surgeons, but also by artists or scientists. There are few restrictions there. It should be an activity that is to some degree active. So easiest is if we perform an activity where we are actively doing something, creating something, but flow can also occur, for example, during meditation. And it can also occur if we are actively and consciously enjoying something. For example, during reading, listening to music, looking at art, or even if we are consciously eating something, really consciously enjoying the taste and so on. But the active element is very important. The negative example used frequently by Csikszentmihalyi is watching TV. If you are passively sitting on the couch and just having the TV running, you won't get a flow experience. Now, I guess if you are a connoisseur of movies and series and you are really into it and you do it as an active and conscious activity, you can probably still experience flow, but this active element, that is quite important. And it is very helpful if it is an activity you like doing, an activity you enjoy. That also makes a flow experience more likely. One very important, by the way, flow can be experienced both alone and in a group. Csikszentmihalyi focuses on examples of activities we do on our own for ourselves, but it can also occur in a group. So again, there are few restrictions there. Now, one very important aspect is there should be a good balance between the difficulty level of the task and our own skill level. They should match well. We should experience a challenge, but we should be able to overcome this challenge using our skills. If the difficulty level is too low, if our skills clearly surpass the task and it is very easy for us, we will experience boredom and we won't have a flow experience. On the other hand, if the difficulty level is very high and it exceeds our skill level and we are unable to really face and overcome the challenge, then this will lead to stress and anxiety, and again, there will be no flow experience. For the flow experience, it needs to be evenly matched. There needs to be a challenge, but we need to be able to overcome it. But there needs to be some challenge. This is important. We need some element of discovery, of overcoming a challenge for the first time, experiencing something new, exceeding our own limits, something like that. Now, if we turn this around, it probably means that it is very difficult to experience flow during routine tasks. I guess if you want to experience flow during routine tasks, you have to create this challenge for yourself. For example, by saying, well, I'm doing the same routine task as yesterday, but today I will do it even faster or even better. So you probably have to create some challenge for yourself. It is furthermore important to have clear, understandable goals. There should not be contradictions or ambiguities, which is probably not always easy to achieve in a professional work environment. So it's helpful there to clear up any contradictions and uncertainties beforehand. And it's also important to have clear, regular feedback. So you need to be able to see if you are progressing well, if what you do works, if you are getting closer to your goal. This is also important. What's also helpful is a high level of control. Now, obviously, on one hand, we get this from this proper match of difficulty level and skill, because we notice that the challenge is within our reach, that we are able to deal with it. But it is also important that we have a certain degree of freedom, but that we receive support where we need it. Again, this might be a challenge sometimes in a professional work environment. There are some activities in areas such as sports and games and arts and culture that are pretty much designed to create flow, where it is very easy to have a flow experience. Think, for example, of a computer game. There you always have a challenge, but it is always a challenge you can overcome. You always have clear goals, clear rules, you receive constant feedback, you are in control, there's a high degree of control, and the whole thing is clearly distinguished, clearly separate from day-to-day reality. So this, of course, makes it easy to have a flow experience, but for other activities, especially work, it might be difficult sometimes, so we might to consciously create the conditions that are helpful to achieve flow. And it helps to approach the activity with the right mindset, with the right attitude, because there are also internal factors. Here, Csikszentmihalyi emphasizes the autotelic personality. Now, autotelic is a technical term that means that we are able to do things for their own sake, to perform activities as an end in itself, and to enjoy the activity in itself. And this is an ability we need to cultivate. It is helpful if we face an activity that seems boring, uninteresting at first glance, if we are able to try to find something interesting in it, still find something about it that is enjoyable, rather than just saying, oh, what a stupid activity. And it also helps if we have a consciousness of free choice. So, for example, we shouldn't say, oh, well, I have to do this task because my boss ordered me to do it. It was forced upon me. It was not my choice. But instead, we should rather say, well, I chose my profession, I chose this job, and the task I'm about to perform now is a result of that choice. So it is something I freely choose. It is not something that was forced upon me. Now, this attitude is very helpful for developing an autotelic personality. It is, of course, useful to have a high degree of control over your own consciousness, especially to have the ability to really focus on a task and to maintain this focus for a long time, to be concentrated for a long time. Now, this can be trained to some extent, and what can be helpful here is to remove distractions as much as possible. So, for example, when you are working, you should not have a mobile phone next to you that is blinking and beeping with messages. Maybe you should tell the people around you that you don't want to be distracted, maybe turn off the phone, whatever, and reduce distractions as much as possible so it is easier for you to maintain your focus. And sometimes it is possible to compensate bad external circumstances to some degree on the internal side. As I said before, if you're doing routine tasks that don't have a lot of challenge, maybe don't have clear goals, it can be helpful to create a challenge for yourself, come up with some additional goals you strive for, to do it especially well, especially quick, something like that. And it is helpful here if you are a person used to the concept of goals, if you are used to setting goals for yourself, striving for goals, setting challenges for yourself, testing yourself, it's helpful not to have an attitude of I always want to go the easy way and I want to avoid any hardship, any challenge. So this is useful. Now, flow certainly is a nice concept, but of course it has its limitations. First of all, Csikszentmihalyi emphasizes that flow by itself is neither good nor bad. People might experience flow during acts of cruelty, in war. The people who worked on the atomic bomb might have experienced flow while doing that. So flow itself is neutral. It's neither good nor bad. Now, one important aspect that remains largely unclear, that I didn't find a lot of information about, is the relationship between flow and productivity. Now, since flow is such a nice experience and our task seems effortless and so on, we certainly get the impression that we are very productive during a flow experience. But is it really true? Think of multitasking, for example. There as well we have the illusion that we are very productive, while in reality we are less productive. And furthermore, if we really are more productive during a flow experience, it would be interesting to know if we are more productive as a result of the flow experience, or if we merely tend to encounter flow in situations where we are really productive. But there are some open questions there. And finally, I should point out that flow doesn't necessarily make us happy. Csikszentmihalyi and his colleagues discovered an interesting paradox there during their studies. Now, what they always did in their studies is they gave participants a pager and a stack of questionnaires, and during the day at regular intervals that pager would go off, would beep, and the participant would take one questionnaire from the stack and fill it out. And that questionnaire asked some questions about the task they did at the moment. What are you doing? Who are you with? Where are you? And so on. And a couple of questions about how they feel. Now, Csikszentmihalyi and his colleagues noticed that flow experiences occur more frequently during work than during free time, during leisure time. And during flow experiences, people give higher ratings to several positive things, like they feel more challenged, more happy, strong, creative, satisfied. All of those get higher ratings during a flow experience. However, there is one question: do you wish you had been doing something else? And this is usually answered yes during work and no during leisure time. So even though people are more likely to experience flow during work, and even though this is a positive experience, they still prefer their leisure time. They still do not actually want to do the work. They prefer to do something else. Now, the interpretation Csikszentmihalyi provides here is, he says that probably our expectations override our actual experiences. So I basically say, yeah, work is bad, leisure time is good. I'm absolutely certain of that. And if my actual experience tells me otherwise, that is probably wrong, I'm probably mistaken. Which is, of course, a possibility. Whatever it is, we should be aware that experiencing flow will not necessarily mean that we enjoy the activity overall. Finally, let me say a few words about the context. Flow is strongly related to the area of positive psychology. Positive psychology is a school of psychology that focuses not so much on mental issues, mental illnesses, but more on the potentials and resources of our psyche, of the mind. Resilience is a typical topic from positive psychology. And flow very much especially Csikszentmihalyi's work about flow pretty much goes in that direction. So we have a strong idea here of flow for a happier life, achieving a happier life through flow. And we have an idea here that is very nice at first glance, but a bit difficult if we think about it more deeply, which is not the external circumstances are responsible for our happiness, but we are ourselves. And this is, of course, very nice, very positive, because we can create our own happiness even if the external circumstances might be against us. But this can easily be turned around, can take quite a sinister turn, if I end up saying, oh well, the reason you are unhappy is not because you have such a lousy job with lousy conditions, miserable conditions. It's your attitude. It's your own fault. And here it takes quite a dark and sinister turn. It's a difficult topic. We discussed it before in the soft skill talk about self-efficacy and responsibility. I linked to it in the video description. You can have a look at it if you are interested. Finally, I think there is a strong relation. There are several similarities between the topic of flow and the topic of mindfulness, because mindfulness is about being present in the current moment, being conscious of what you are doing. There is a nice story, I think I read it in Jon Kabat-Zinn's Full Catastrophe Living, where a couple of peasants approach the wise elder and they ask him, yeah, wise elder, you are always so relaxed and in a good mood. How do you do it? And the wise elder says, oh, it's quite easy. If I walk, I walk. If I sit, I sit. If I eat, I eat. And the peasants say, yeah, but we are doing that as well. And the elder says, not quite. If you are walking, in your mind, you are already at your destination. If you are sitting down, in your mind, you've already gotten up again. If you are eating, in your mind, you are already doing something else. And this idea of really being with the activity you're doing, being conscious of it, of course, this is very similar to how Csikszentmihalyi describes the autotelic personality, similar to this idea of enjoying the activity itself. So I guess there are some strong relations there. In which activities do you experience flow? Let me know in the comments. I'm looking forward to your feedback. While you're at it, I would be quite happy about a like, and even more so if you subscribe to the channel. We will see each other again next week. For today, I'll take my leave. Have a nice day. See you next time.